Have you ever felt that nagging feeling, that deep down belief that if only that person would just change? Partner, maybe a family member, even a friend.
Oh, yeah.
That feeling like if they just do things differently, everything would finally click. It feels like you're stuck, right? Trying to sort of fix or nudge someone you really care about.
It's incredibly common. We see it
Like,
everywhere.
absolutely. And that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're looking at this really powerful insight from writer Ajay Bhalla, specifically his work on the illusion of control in relationships.
Mm.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack why trying to change people often just leads to frustration, maybe even unhappiness. And more importantly, how accepting a kind of fundamental truth can actually open the door to, well, real freedom and peace in your connections.
Yeah, finding that peace.
We'll look at the hidden costs of holding on to this illusion and maybe figure out what really works to bring people closer. We're drawing on some insightful bits from Bala's work, including a story that honestly really nails this whole concept.
It's a great story.
So, okay, let's unpack this. What is it about trying to change someone that feels so, I don't know, so right sometimes, yet it seems to backfire so often?
Well, it often comes from a good place, right? You want things to be better, smoother. But the source material points out how many relationships, especially marriages, get trapped in this exact cycle.
Right.
And it's not just a little spat here and there. It can be, as Bala describes it, a battle lasting 10, 20, even 30 years.
Wow, decades.
Yeah.
That's a long time to be fighting that fight.
It is. And the result. He calls it wasted time, drained energy, and emotional suffering. It's a really stark image, like being caught in a loop you can't escape.
Yeah, a self-imposed prison almost.
Exactly. And people often stay stuck because they haven't really grappled with what our source calls an undeniable truth.
Which is,
The core idea, the really big one, is this: you cannot change another person. Full stop.
oof, that's blunt.
It is.
Look.
And it's presented not just as advice, but as a foundational thing you need to realize. But the moment you truly accept it, I mean, really let it sink in.
Yeah. Burden starts to lift. The source says, sleepless nights, endless arguments, silent suffering, they all start to fade. Peace starts creeping in where the struggle was. Clarity replaces that confusion. It's described as the beginning of true freedom.
That's a huge shift then, from constantly trying to fix to acceptance. But acceptance isn't just giving up, is it?
No, not at all. It's about recognizing where your actual power lies.
Yeah.
And to really illustrate this illusion of control, the source tells this story about a couple, Ajay and Sita.
Okay.
Now, on the outside, they looked perfect, A lovely home, steady jobs, and a relationship that seemed strong, the whole package.
The classic picture, right? Seen it many times.
But behind closed doors, it was a totally different story. Lots of constant arguments, silent treatments, and frustration.
And the root cause was?
Control, that deep need for control. Each of them was constantly trying to make the other person fit their idea of who they should be.
Ah, the shoulds. Exactly. So Sita, for example, she wanted Ajay to be more ambitious, more organized, more expressive. Her thinking was, if only he changed, she could finally feel at peace.
Right, making her peace dependent on him.
And OJ. He wanted Sita to be less emotional, more practical, less questioning. He figured if only she behaved the way he expected, life would be smoother.
It's that conditional happiness trap again. I'll be happy when you.
Precisely. So day after day, it was this relentless effort to fix each other. Nagging, arguing, resentment building up. Even small, insignificant issues would just blow up into complaints and loud discussions.
God, that sounds exhausting. And honestly, probably pretty familiar to a lot of people listening, even if they don't frame it as control.
It's a very common dynamic. But then comes this turning point in their story. Sita's mother comes to visit, sees what's going on, and after a few weeks, she shares some wisdom.
Okay, the wise mother moment.
Yeah. She asks Sita, do you know the biggest reason people stay unhappy? And then she says, it's the desire to control others.
Straight to the point.
Right. She continues, we think if they change, we'll feel better. But it never works that way. She calls this need to control the biggest illusion we fall into. That belief that only when others behave our way, only then will we feel happy. But, she says, real happiness doesn't work that way.
Wow, that's powerful. It's hard. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, right? How does this story pivot? What happens after Sita hears this? What can we learn from her breakthrough?
Well, it clearly hit home for Sita. That night, instead of focusing on Ajay's supposed flaws, she started reflecting on her own expectations, her own need for him to be different.
The inward turn.
Exactly. And over the next few weeks, she consciously decided to practice acceptance, just letting Ajay be Ajay as he was. She stopped the micromanaging his choices, his routines, even his moods.
That must have been hard.
Probably incredibly hard at first. But crucially, she shifted her focus inward onto her own reactions, her own sense of peace, her own inner space, as the text says. It was a total redirection of her energy, away from controlling him towards managing herself.
And the outcome. The source calls it almost magical, but thinking about it, it actually makes a lot of sense.
It does. What happened was the tension in their home just started to dissolve. Slowly, maybe, but surely.
No, without the pressure cooker.
Exactly. Without the pressure, without the arguments, AJ naturally started communicating more. He started making small efforts. And the key part, not because he was forced, but because the space felt safe.
That's huge. Creating a safe space allowed him to change organically instead of demanding it.
Right. It's fascinating how her internal shift created this ripple effect. It allowed him the space to change too, but on his own terms.
So did AJ notice the change in her?
Oh, absolutely. He noticed Sita's calmness, and it inspired him. He, in turn, let go of his need to control her emotions. He started actually listening without judgment and loving without conditions.
So they both ended up shifting.
They both did. Their journey really highlights this simple but profound truth. Happiness doesn't come from changing others. It comes from changing how we respond to others.
It's about reclaiming your own power, isn't it? Realizing your control is over yourself.
That's exactly it. Empowerment through self-awareness and self-management, not through external manipulation.
That really reframes everything, moving from this draining external fight to, well, an empowering internal practice. So how do we take these lessons from Ajay and Sita and actually use them? The source material pulls out some key points to remain truly happy, all right?
Yes, practical takeaways. The first one is probably the toughest for many. Let go of the need to control others.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Definitely. But the text uses a great metaphor. People are not projects. You can't just tinker with them until they fit your specs. And the consequence, the more you try to fix them, the more you damage the bond.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nobody likes feeling like a project or like they're constantly failing someone's expectations.
Which leads directly to the second point. Accept people as they are.
And this isn't about being a doormat, right?
No, the source is very clear. Acceptance is not weakness, it is wisdom. It's wise because it frees up your energy from fighting unwinnable battles. Weakness, arguably, is sticking to strategies that just don't work. The advice is simple. Let others be themselves and you'll breathe lighter. Let go of that struggle.
Breathe lighter. I like that. It feels less heavy. Okay, what's next?
Point 3 is crucial. Shift focus inward. This echoes C's transformation. It's all about self-mastery.
Okay.
Instead of pouring energy into managing others, the idea is to master your own thoughts, reactions, and emotions. It's recognizing that your internal state, your peace, doesn't have to be dictated by someone else's actions.
So if someone does something annoying, instead of immediately trying to stop them, you look at your own annoyance first.
Kind of, yeah. You notice the reaction rising in you and ask, okay, how do I want to handle this feeling? How can I maintain my own peace here? It's about owning your internal experience.
And once you got that inward focus, you can practice point 4. Respond, don't react.
Exactly. And the distinction is important. Calm responses create connection. Impulsive reactions create conflict.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Reacting might be snapping back instantly when criticized, or maybe giving the silent treatment. It's automatic, emotional. Responding involves a pause, maybe a deep breath. It's choosing your words or actions consciously, maybe saying, okay, I hear you're upset, let's talk about this calmly, instead of just firing back.
The pause makes all the difference. That space between stimulus and response.
It really does. And finally, point 5 is about creating a safe emotional space.
Like what happened with Ajay and Sita.
Precisely. The insight is, when people feel free, not forced, they naturally grow closer and more cooperative. This isn't about having no boundaries or letting people walk all over you.
Right.
It's about fostering an environment where people feel accepted for who they are, where they can be vulnerable, communicate honestly, and maybe even evolve, but because they want to, because they feel safe, not because they're being pressured or controlled. Connection thrives in freedom.
Not in constraint. Wow. Okay, so bringing this all together, what does this mean for, for you listening, whether it's your partner, your kids, your boss, your colleagues? This whole approach feels like it could really change the dynamic, which raises a question.
Well, yeah, if you zoom out, these aren't just relationship tips for couples. They're really universal principles, aren't they? Principles for building genuine connection and finding personal peace in pretty much any situation where you're interacting with another human being.
True.
It applies whenever you feel that urge, conscious or not, to kind of nudge someone or fix them or get them to see things your way. Many of us have heard you can't change others before, but this deep dive really explores why it's so hard to actually live that way and just how freeing it is when you finally manage it.
Yeah, this whole exploration into the illusion of control
Yeah.
really highlights how much energy we waste, doesn't it? Trying to mold people. It feels like the burden is mostly self-inflicted.
It often is.
And that real happiness, real freedom in relationships, it doesn't come from getting someone else to change. It comes from changing how we show up, how we accept things, where we put our energy, cultivating that peace inside first.
Which then, almost paradoxically, creates the conditions for positive change around you.
It's less about fixing, more about freeing.
Yeah,
Freeing them and freeing yourself.
well put. And maybe that leads to a final thought for everyone listening today.
Okay.
If happiness truly comes from changing how we respond to others, not from controlling them, consider this. What deep-seated assumption about control, maybe one you didn't even realize you had, might you need to challenge in your own life to find a bit more peace and cooperation?